It started.
Yeah.
Like, I could probably figure out how to do this. Like, if it's for Renee, I think I might be able to see what she.
All right. One of the things we're going to do that as I'm reading, I will, as I'm reading, what time do you guys have to leave, by the way, you cross-country people?
9:40.
Okay, all right.
Oh my god, am I gonna be alone? You guys both are leaving. I can't do this.
All right. I gotta talk fast. Well, I can. So as we go through book 19, there are going to be several symbols in here. You may want to jot them down. Next week, I plan on giving you a class period to chat with each other about your symbols, figure out which symbol you want to write about in your typed essay that you're going to type out. And then just remember that next, where's my glasses? So here it says November 2nd, which is next Friday. It says a quiz, but you're not going to have a quiz, you're going to have a timed write on Friday. And I hope there's not a rally, I hope there's not anything to interfere with that, or a matches, or a competition or something. But there's a timed write next Friday, and you will not know the prompt. You have no clue what the prompt is. So you're going to have a class period to prep for your essay, for the simple essay, and also to review everything in the Odyssey so you know what to write about, and we'll do a writing review, and then you should be good to go. Okay. Now, on page 353, book 19, time is going to slow way, way, way down. Books 19 through 24, we have basically less than a 24-hour period, so for 5. Remember that books 13 through 24 anyway, there's incredible loss. So Odysseus does not get to have the opportunity to see his island when he gets home. He can't recognize it. He's asleep. We have that beautiful epic simile when he and Telemachus reunite, and we're reminded of the 20 years that have been lost between them. Odysseus only has known the kindness of Eumaeus and the welcome of his son, but it's not until he starts walking to his hall that the first other servant that he sees, Melanthios, who's the goat herd, is the one who tries to kick him off the trail, and even though he thinks he wants to turn him upside down and bash his head of brains on the ground, he can't do that. He's called a dog and a pig, and that guy says right to his face, I wish Telemachus would die, or I wish the suitors would cut him down. He goes in, he sees his dog left. I mean, the loss is unbelievable, and he has to completely stay in character. Eumaeus tells Penelope about the beggar, or Penelope hears about him. And remember that the one kind of comic relief, well, there are a few comic reliefs, especially when he thinks to himself how he wants to punch people out. But Penelope walks down the stairs, and she wants to get gifts from the suitors. Remember, that's the first time in 20 years Odysseus has seen his wife. And so he looks at her, watches her coming down the stairs, and he laughs. He gets to laugh because, oh my gosh, she's still beautiful. And look at, she's trying to get all these gifts from the suitors at the same time as she's rebuking them for not bringing her anything. And so then they go and scramble and bring all their stuff to her, and he thinks that's awesome. He's afraid, obviously, she wants to meet with the beggar and say, have you heard any news from Odysseus, about Odysseus? And he doesn't want to meet with her during the day. Because remember, if anybody's going to recognize him, it's going to be his wife. So he says, no, let's meet in the evening. And that way he knows they'll be by the fireside, it'll be kind of dark. He's going to have to be very careful because he also doesn't know which of the maids are wicked. And we're going to see one of the wicked maids here speak to him. So he also has to do he has to make sure that no one finds out, because if any of the maids find out, they will run and tell the suitors. And again, the gig is up and he'll die. So everything is very precarious right now. All right, 353, here we go. Now by Athena's side, in the quiet hall, studying the ground for slaughter. I love that. He's just like looking at the hall, like how am I gonna take out all these guys? Lord Odysseus turned to Telemachus. The arms, he said, Harness and weapons must be out of sight in the inner room, and if the suitors miss them, be mild. Just say, I had a mind to move them out of the smoke. They seem no longer the bright arms that Odysseus left at home when he went off to Troy. Here where the fire's hot breath came, they had grown black and drear. One better reason struck me too. Suppose a brawl starts up when you've been drinking, you might in madness let each other's blood, and that would stain your feast, your courtship. Iron itself can draw men's hands. Now this is just a reminder of the task that he gave to Telemachus. Then he fell silent, and Telemachus obeyed his father's word. He called Euryclea the nurse and told her, Nurse, go shut the women in their quarters, while I shift father's armor back to the inner rooms, these beautiful arms unburnished, caked with black soot in his years abroad. I was a child then, well, I am not now. I want them shielded from the draught and smoke. And the old woman answered, It is time, child, you took an interest in such things. I wish you'd put your mind on all your house and chattels, but who will go along to hold a light? You said no maids, no torchbearers. Telemachus looked at her and replied, Our friend here, a man who shares my meat, can bear a hand no matter how far he is from home. He spoke so soldierly, her own speech halted on her tongue. Straight back she went to lock the doors of the women's hall. And now the two men sprang to work. So as soon as she's gone, they're like, whoof, up they go. Father and princely son, loaded with round helms and studded bucklers, they're like gathering up all of the weaponry, lifting the long spears, while in their path Pallas Athena held up a golden lamp of purest light. Telemachus at last burst out, Oh, Father, here is a marvel. All around I see the walls and roof beams, pedestals and pillars lighted as though by white fire blazing near. One of the gods of heaven is in this place. Then said Odysseus, the great tactician, Be still. Keep still about it. Just remember it. The gods who rule Olympus make this light. You may go off to bed now. Here I stay to test your mother and her maids again. Out of her long grief, she will question me. Okay, Penelope comes down, and one of the things that we want to look at throughout the next probably 3 books is does Penelope know who Odysseus is? So remember, Homer is telling this story to a Greek audience that already knows a lot of the details and knows the outcome. So how are you going to make this story a little bit different? It's the same reason why they come out with a new Cinderella like every few years, and we all go see it, because we're like, we all know the story, we all know how it turns out. What are they going to do that's different? Here, one of the things that Homer does is he creates this ambiguity on Penelope's part, because we're like, does she know it's Odysseus, or does she not know it's Odysseus? So we're going to be looking at that as we read as well. Because the first thing that she does at the bottom of 355 is, or wait, not through, she does it a little bit later, but the first thing she's going to do is she's going to pour out her heart to this beggar. She's going to tell how much she loved Odysseus, how much she loves him, and how she wishes he was here. And then she's going to tell him about the whole weaving trick. And why would she do that? And then she says, I'm desperate. I have to get married. I have no more time. Okay, so it's like, why would she pour out her heart to this beggar unless she knew that? But then there are other times where we're going to see that she doesn't, where it's going to be kind of obvious that she doesn't know it all. And all the scholarship that's been, hundreds of essays have been written on this, and everybody disagrees. Let's look at 355. I just want you to see how dangerous this situation is. And line 80. We'll look at line 80 on 355. So, husband and wife are sitting by the hearth, something very symbolic about that, by the fireplace. And the wicked maidservants are around, and here's what one of them says in line 79. And now a second time, Melantho's voice, Melantho is the sister of Melanthios, the evil goatherd, who's sleeping with the suitor Eurymachus, rang brazen in Odysseus' ear. Ah, stranger, are you still here, so creepy late at night, hanging about, looking the women over? You old goat, go outside, cuddle your supper, get out, or a torch may kindle you behind. At this Odysseus glared under his brows. He does a lot of glaring under his brows. And said, little devil, why pitch into me again? Because I go unwashed and wear these rags and make the rounds? But so I must, being needy. This is the way a vagabond must live. And do not overlook this. In my time, I too had luck, lived well, stood well with men, and gave alms often to poor wanderers like him you see before you, aye, to all sorts, no matter in what dire want. And then he goes on to say, I owned many servants, etc., etc. Penelope rebukes her servant, says, you know how I long for Odysseus to come home. You know he's the only one I want to come home. Why would you say this? So again, saying this in front of the beggar. And then she turns to Odysseus and she says, so where are you from? And the one thing he says is, don't ask me that question. He said, you can ask me anything else. But the pain is too much for me to recall. And we have to think for a minute that here Odysseus, who can come up with anything, again, he's silent in front of his mother. He stumbles over his words in front of his son. And here with Penelope, he knows he has to lie to her. It's almost like he can't quite do it yet. So this is when Penelope launches into her problem with the suitors. So bottom of 357, or actually the second to the last paragraph. She says, stranger, my looks, my face, my carriage were soon lost or faded when the Achaeans crossed the sea to Troy. Odysseus, my lord, among the rest. If he returned, if he were to care for me, I might be happily renowned. But grief instead, heaven sent me years of pain. Sons of the noblest families of the islands, Dulichion, Same, wooded Zacynthus, with native Ithacans are here to court me against my wish, and they consume this house. Can I give proper heed to guest or suppliant or herald on the realm's affairs? How could I, wasted with longing for Odysseus, while here they pressed for marriage? Ruses or tricks served my turn to draw the time out. Now, several of you are going to want to write on the loom and the weaving trick. So just think about this. This has been repeated 3 times, each by a different person, now by Penelope herself. First, a close-grained web. I had the happy thought to set up weaving on my big loom and hall. I said that day, young men, my suitors, now my lord is dead. Let me finish my weaving before I marry, or else my thread will have been spun in vain. It is a shroud I weave for Lord Laertes when cold death comes to lay him on his bier. The country wives would hold me in dishonor if he with all his fortune lay unshrouded. I reached their hearts that way, and they agreed. So every day I wove on the great loom, but every night by torchlight I unwove it, and so for 3 years I deceived the Achaeans. But when the seasons brought a 4th year on, as long months waned, and the long days were spent through impudent folly in the slinking maids, they caught me, clamored up to me at night. I had no choice then but to finish it. And now, as matters stand at last, I have no strength left to evade a marriage, cannot find any further way. My parents urge it upon me. My son will not stand by while they eat up his property. He comprehends it, being a man full grown, able to oversee the kind of house Zeus would endow with honor. Okay, so you'll talk about this next week, but just think about this. Here she is, she's weaving a shroud of death. And she's weaving all day long, and she gets closer and closer, and then she unweaves it at night and gets further and further away. All day long she weaves closer to the shroud of death, and all night long she unweaves it. So she does this for 3 long years, getting closer and then further away, and closer and further away, using all her wits and every possible thing that she can to put off the suitors and to keep herself available for her husband. Okay, so who does that remind you of? Who does that remind you of? Yeah. So he's getting closer to home and further away, closer to home and further away, and she's like closer to the death shroud and further away. So you've got the weaving act itself, you've got the death shroud itself, you've got Penelope's wits and cleverness to put things off. You've got all of these associations with this symbol of the loom and the weaving trick. Okay, now she's given her story. She's also told this guy, this beggar, how desperate her situation is. And she says, now tell me your story. Well, what he does is he tells a story about him seeing Odysseus. I did see Odysseus, but it was when he was on his way to Troy. And as he tells the details of seeing Odysseus and hosting him at his father's house and then sending him off, if you turn to page 360, he's telling one lie after another to his wife, who's sitting there. And here we get this beautiful epic simile here. at the top. Now all these lies he made appear so truthful. She wept as she sat listening. The skin of her pale face grew moist, the way pure snow softens and glistens on the mountains, thawed by south wind after powdering from the west. And as the snow melts, mountain streams run full. So we think about all the snow that's melting and the water that comes from there and the mountain springs. So her white cheeks were wetted by these tears, shed for her Lord, and he close by her side. Imagine how his heart ached for his lady, his wife in tears, and yet he never blinked. His eyes might have been made of horn or iron for all that she could see. He had this trick, wept, if he willed to, inwardly. So it's the first time he's finally able to keep all of his tears inside. I mean, all of that practice with him crying and everything. He figured out how to weep inwardly without showing any emotion outwardly. And here's his wife sobbing in front of him, longing for her husband. And then she says, I don't know if I would better trust you if you could tell me what he was wearing when you saw him. It says, Odysseus with his mind-ranging part. Holy cow, what was I wearing 20 years ago when I left? And then he describes the purple cape and the fleece and this brooch that she had given him, and he describes everything in detail and the way he treated his men and the man who was his right hand. And when she hears that, she says, I made that for him. I dressed him the day that he went off, the last day that I saw him. So again, she's crying, and then she tells him, okay, I'm gonna make sure that you get a bath. We need to make sure that you're bathed. We're gonna make up a bed for you. And he says, you know what, I'm so used to sleeping outside that, or I don't need a bed made up for me. Don't take care of me, don't worry about me, okay? And let's go to 364, because this is really where I'm gonna spend my time. Hopefully I can get through some of this before you guys have to leave. So, Odysseus answered, we're kind of at the top. Honorable lady, wife of Odysseus, Laertiades. A weight of rugs and cover not for me. I've had none since the day I saw the mountains of Crete, white with snow, low on the sea line, fading behind me as the long oars drove me north. Let me lie down tonight as I've lain often many a night unsleeping, many a time afield on hard ground waiting for pure dawn. No, I have no longing for a foot bath either. None of these maids will touch my feet. Unless there is an old one, old and wise, one who has lived through suffering as I have, I would not mind letting my feet be touched by that old servant. So he's asking for Eurycleia. Eurycleia is the one who raised him. She's the one who nursed him, because that's what servants did in those days. They even nursed they were called wet nurses. And Penelope said, dear guest, no foreign man so sympathetic ever came to my house, no guest more likable, so wry and humble are the things you say. I have an old maidservant, ripe with years, one who in her time nursed my lord. She took him into her arms the hour his mother bore him. Let her then wash your feet, though she is frail. Come here, stand by me, faithful Eurycleia, and bathe. Bathe your master. I almost said, for they are of an age, and now Odysseus' feet and hands would be enseamed like his. Men grow old soon in hardship. So it's interesting, she says, bathe your master. Hearing this, the old nurse hid her face between her hands and wept hot tears and murmured, oh, my dear child, I can do nothing for you. How Zeus hated you, no other man so much, no use, great heart. Oh, faithful heart, the rich thigh bones that you burnt to Zeus who plays in lightning, and no man ever gave more to Zeus with all your prayers for a green age, a tall son reared to manhood. There is no day of homecoming for you. Strangers, some women in some far-off place perhaps have mocked my lord when he'd be home, as now these strumpets or whores, that's another word for whores, a strumpet, mock you here. No wonder you would keep clear of all their whorishness and have no bath. But here am I, the queen Penelope, Icarius' daughter, bids me. So let me bathe your feet to serve my lady and to serve you too. So she's basically saying, you have no idea how we've been longing for Odysseus to come back and the way people treat him, it's awful. But here I am, I will come and happily bathe your feet, old beggar man. So then she says, my heart within me stirs, mindful of something. Listen to what I say. Strangers have come here, many through the years, but no one ever came, I swear, who seems so like Odysseus, body, voice, and limbs as you do. Ready for this, Odysseus answered, old woman, oh, that's what they all say. All who have seen the two of us remark how like we are, as you yourself have said, and rightly too. Then he kept still while the old nurse filled up her basin, glittering in firelight. She poured cold water in, then hot. But Lord Odysseus whirled suddenly from the fire to face the dark. The scar, he had forgotten that. She must not handle his scarred thigh, or the game was up. But when she bared her lord's leg and the tunic came over his thigh, bending near, she knew the groove at once. Okay, the scar, which is going to be inextricably linked to his name, is going to be another critical symbol. Just to let you know, they didn't have DNA testing. There was no 23andMe back then. So if someone came to Ithaca and said, I am Odysseus, and they didn't have the signifying signature scar or some identifying mark, there's no way they can be Odysseus. But some beggar could come, somebody not looking like Odysseus. They have that scar, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, that's Odysseus. Okay, so let's read about the scar. She sees the scar, she sees the groove, she recognizes it, and she has this immediate flashback. So now we're going to read the flashback. An old wound, a boar's white tusk inflicted on Parnassus years ago. He had gone hunting there on this island in company with his uncles and Autolycus, his mother's father, so his grandfather, who was a great thief and swindler, bless you, by Hermes' favor. For Autolycus pleased him with burnt offerings of sheep and kids. So his grandfather was kind of a thief and a swindler, but Hermes liked him because he's kind of like that anyway. The god acted as his accomplice. Okay, so we have this where Odysseus is like probably 12, 13, something like that. And he's going to an island to go visit his grandfather. Now we're going to another level of flashback when he was born. Okay, so we're stepping back again. The god Autolycus on a trip to Ithaca arrived just after his daughter's boy was born. In fact, he had no sooner finished supper than Nurse Eurycleia put the baby down in his own lap and said, it is for you now to choose a name for him, your child's dear baby, the answer to her prayers. In ancient Greece, it was the grandparents who named the child, just as it is in many Middle Eastern cultures today. The grandparent actually names the child. Autolycus replied, my son-in-law, my daughter, call the boy by the name I tell you. Well you know my hand has been against the world of men and women. Odium and distrust I've won. Nobody trusts me. Everybody thinks I'm awful. Odysseus should be his given name. And the name Odysseus means giver and receiver of pain. That's what his name means. Pain man. When he grows up, when he comes visiting his mother's home under Parnassus, where my treasures are, I'll make him gifts and send him back rejoicing. Okay, so we have the 12-year-old getting ready to go to the island, but then we have the flashback to the baby and him naming him, giver and receiver of pain. We're going to see how that's all going to come to fruition here on his hunting trip. Odysseus, in due course, went for the gifts, and old Autolycus and his sons embraced him with welcoming sweet words. And Amphithea, his mother's mother, held him tight and kissed his head and his fine eyes. The father called on his noble sons to make a feast, and going about it briskly, they led in an ox of 5 years, whom they killed and flayed and cut in bits for roasting on the skewers with skilled hands, with care, then shared it out. So all the day until sun went down, they feasted to their heart's content. At evening, after the sun was down and dusk had come, they turned to bed and took the gift of sleep. When the young dawn spread in the eastern sky her fingertips of rose, the men and dogs went hunting, taking Odysseus. They climbed Parnassus's rugged flank, mantled in forest, entering amid high windy folds at noon, when Helios beat upon the valley floor and on the winding ocean whence he came. With hounds questing ahead, in open order, the sons of Autolycus, the uncles, went down a glen, like a little valley. Odysseus was in the lead at like 12 or 13, behind the dogs, pointing his long, shadowing spear. So there he is running through the forest with the dogs. Before them, a great boar lay hid in undergrowth. Now listen to this description of where he's hiding. In a green thicket, proof against the wind or sun's blaze, fine soever the needling sunlight, impervious too to any rain, so dense that cover was, heaped up with fallen leaves. Do you guys remember where that's from? The exact description? He was in a pile of leaves. Remember where it was? In Scaria. So the same exact description. So now we have to see this boar is piled up under these bushes that are described exactly the way Odysseus was piled up under these protective bushes on Scaria. So we're looking symbolically at this too, because there are all kinds of levels of symbolism going on here. Okay, but he's hiding. Patter of hounds' feet, men's feet, woke the boar as they came up. So all of a sudden the boar wakes from his sleep. And from his woody ambush, with razor back bristling and raging eyes, he trotted and stood at bay. The boars are hideous to look at. They're not like Pumbaa and Lion King. I mean, they're really freaking scary. Anyway, Odysseus, being on top of it, had the first shot, lunging to stick him, but the boar had already charged under the long spear. He hooked aslant with one white tusk and ripped out flesh above the knee, but missed the bone. That's how deep that was. Odysseus' second thrust went home by luck, his bright spear passing through the shoulder joint, and the beast fell, moaning as life pulsed away. So here in this moment, you've got Odysseus being the giver of pain and the receiver of pain at the same time, living out his name, but also as the boar who's waking up and ready to also receive pain, foreshadowing that, be the giver and the receiver of pain at the same time. Okay. Autolycus' tall sons took up the wounded. They're like, oh my gosh, he's going to die. They're working skillfully over the prince Odysseus to bind his gash. With a rune, they stanched the dark flow of blood. Then downhill swiftly, they all repaired to the father's house, and there tended him well. So well, they soon could send him with grandfather Autolycus magnificent gifts, rejoicing over sea to Ithaca. His father and the lady Anticlea welcomed him and wanted all the news of how he got his wound. So he spun out his tale, recalling how the boar's white tusk caught him when he was hunting on Parnassus. And this was the scar the old nurse recognized. This whole flashback is her flashback as she's holding the scar. She traced it under her spread hands, then let go, and into the basin fell the lower leg, making the bronze clang, sloshing the water out. Then joy and anguish seized her heart. Her eyes filled up with tears, her throat closed, and she whispered with hand held out to touch his chin, "Oh, yes, you are Odysseus. Ah, dear child, I could not see you until now, not till I knew my master's very body with my hands." Okay, it's not his whole body, just his leg. So, anyway, her eyes turned to Penelope with desire to make her lord, her husband, known in vain, because Athena had bemused the queen, so that she took no notice, paid no heed. Apparently she couldn't, she was distracted. At the same time as she went to go tell Penelope, Odysseus' right hand gripped the old throat. His left hand pulled her near, and in her ear he said, "Will you destroy me, nurse, who gave me milk at your own breast? Now with a hard lifetime behind, I've come in the 20th year home to my father's island. You found me out as the chance was given you. Be quiet, keep it from the others, else I warn you, and I mean it too, if by my hand God brings the suitors down, I'll kill you, nurse or not, when the time comes to kill the other women."
Well done.
Now you gotta remember, he's panicked because if Penelope, he also knows that Melantho is there. If Penelope finds out, again, he can't have it, and he responds the way Odysseus does respond, you know. And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna, but here's what's really interesting. We always have to look at the way that people respond. Like when Telemachus kind of disrespects his mom and Penelope holds her tongue and she walks away, we have to say, okay, there's something going on here. So let's see what the nurse says. Euryclea kept her wits and answered him, "Oh, what bad words are these you let escape you? Child, you know my blood, my bones are yours. No one could whip this out of me. I'll be a woman turned to stone, iron I'll be, and let me tell you too, mind now, if God cuts down the arrogant suitors by your hand, I can report to you and all the maids, those who dishonor you, and the innocent. You have to remember, he also doesn't know still yet if Eurycleia is among the people that are faithful or not faithful. But I just want to read to you the way it sounds in the Greek. This is what she's saying. What mad words are you talking about? Don't you know who I am? Pipe down. I'm not going to turn you in. Who do you think I am? I mean, that's what she's like, this little old lady like, you're getting all hot and bothered. Just settle down. I'm going to take care of you. Don't worry about it. Now, shh. Okay, let's get back to our little thing here. But in response, the great tactician said, "Nurse, no need to tell me tales of these. I will have seen them, each one for myself. Trust in the gods, be quiet, hold your peace." Silent, the old nurse went to fetch more water, her basin being all spilt. When she had washed and rubbed his feet with golden oil, he turned, dragging his bench again to the fireside for warmth, and hid the scar under his rags. I think you guys need to go, right? Okay, make sure that you read the test 371, the test of the bow, and then also read 20. And tomorrow I'm reading 21 and 22. Although there's a rally tomorrow, and half of you are going to be gone at the rally. Is that the deal? What's going on tomorrow?
Yeah, there's a rally tomorrow.
Okay, well, I'm finishing up 21 and 22 tomorrow. So that's what I'm doing. I'm reading. Okay. Bye. Run hard, run fast. Okay. Be free. I don't know. Okay. Yay. Run.
That was good.
What's that? Run.
Run like the wind.
Run like the wind. That's what I wanted to say. I wanted to say run. I felt like, I don't know, I felt like I was releasing Free Willy or something. That's what What's that? What was that?
Me
Run
too,
fast.
every day.
I don't know. Anyway. Oh my gosh. All right. There we go. Okay, so now here's what happens. By the way, just if you think about this whole scar, again, we've got the boar, the scar, and the name all intertwined, representing, like now that we know the whole story, it's like representing everything in the story. It's so cool the way that Homer does this. Was there a boar? Was there a scar? There's no other record of that anywhere else except for here. So again, something else that Homer may have put in just to make this a lot more interesting to his original audience and to us. Okay, Penelope's going to tell the beggar about this dream that she has where she'll say, I had all these geese and, they were all around me, and then the eagle came and ate all my geese. And then somebody told me, somebody shouted that, oh, that's Odysseus come back to kill all the suitors. What do you think it means? And the beggar says, well, that Odysseus is here somewhere and he's going to come kill all the suitors. I think that's what your dream means. So again, we just don't know whether she knows it's him or not. Why is she unfolding all of this information to him? Okay, so 371, top of 371. The master of subtle ways and straight replied, my dear, how can you choose to read the dream differently? Has not Odysseus himself shown you what is to come? Because that's who is, interpreting the dream. Death to the suitors, sure death too, not one escapes his doom. Penelope shook her head and answered, friend, many and many a dream is mere confusion, a cobweb of no consequence at all. 2 gates for ghostly dreams there are, one gateway of honest horn and one of ivory. Issuing by the ivory gate are dreams of glimmering illusion, fantasies, but those that come through solid polished horn may be borne out if mortals only know them. That's the way they distinguish 2 kinds of dreams. I don't know much about that. I doubt it came by horn, my fearful dream, because that would be too good to be true. That for my son and me. But one thing more I wish to tell you, listen carefully. It is a black day that this that comes. Odysseus' house and I are to be parted. I shall decree a contest for the day. We have 12 axe heads. In his time, my lord could line them up, all 12 at intervals, like a ship's ribbing. Then he'd back away a long way off and whip an arrow through. Now I'll impose this trial on the suitors. The one who easily handles and strings the bow and shoots through all 12 axes I shall marry, whoever he may be. Then look my last on this my first love's beautiful brimming house. But I'll remember though I dream it only. I'm gonna talk to you about this in a minute. Let me finish out the book. Odysseus said, Dear honorable lady, wife of Odysseus Laertiades, I always get that wrong. Let there be no postponement of the trial. Odysseus, who knows the shifts of combat, will be here. He'll be here long before one of these lads can stretch or string that bow or shoot to thread the iron. Grave and wise Penelope replied, If you were willing to sit with me and comfort me, my friend, no ride of sleep would ever close my eyes. But mortals cannot go forever sleepless. This is the undying God's decree for all who live and die on earth, kind furrowed earth. Upstairs I go, then to my single bed, my sighing bed, what with so many tears after my lord Odysseus took ship to see that misery at Ilion unspeakable. Let me rest there, you hear, you can stretch out on the bare floor, or else command a bed. So she went up to her chamber, softly lit, accompanied by her maids. Once there she wept for Odysseus, her husband, till Athena cast sweet sleep upon her eyes. Okay, I'm going to tell you. She is desperate. She needs one final way to keep the suitors off. And she's telling Odysseus this. If she knows the beggar is Odysseus, she's telling him her idea. Otherwise, she's just sharing her idea. But here's the deal. There's this huge bow that Odysseus got when he was having this interchange on an island. It was a bow that was so massive, only he could string it, and he did not take it to war with him. And she's saying that she's going to bring that down, and there was this trick that he used to do. So let me tell you about axes back in ancient Greek times. So warriors had a belt to which they had their sword that they would, have their scabbard or whatever that's called. They put their sword in. They would have another type of weapon. They would carry their spear, and they would also have an axe, a battle axe, and would have a huge handle, massive axe head. And typically, what the scholars think is that the hole would be drilled in the corner of the axe head. And so a leather, they would take, like a leather piece of leather rope, and then they would lash it to their belt in such a way so that when they were in the middle of battle, they could grab the axe and also use the axe with their sword. Okay, so it was something they could easily take off that was lashed to the axe head. So the way that it looks on some of the Greek vases that are painted is, if you imagine the hall is still a hall from ancient Greece, so the floor would be dirt. And what they would do is they would dig holes and they would line the axes up so that they would look like a ship's ribbing. So if you can imagine the handles in the floor and the axe is coming up this way, so the whole of the axe head is here. And then a foot beyond that, they would dig a hole and the axe handle would go here, and then it would come up at an angle, and the axe head would face this way, okay? But as they did that with all 12 of them, the holes, when you looked at them, would all line up. Does that make sense? And so what they would do is they would have these contests. Okay, let's see who can shoot an arrow through all the axe heads all the way through without touching them. And so Odysseus would have everybody do that, and then he would take out his big bow that only he could string, and then he would string it with ease, and then he would shoot the arrow through all the axe heads. So she's saying, this is the contest. Anybody who can actually string the bow and shoot the arrow through the axe heads, I guess that's the one I'm going to marry, because nobody else could do that with him except Odysseus, so that's what I'm thinking. Now, the thing that with Odysseus, the reason why he is going to like this is that there will be a way that he can get the bow into his hands. He's got to figure out how to get the bow, that big bow, into his hands. And so, again, is she plotting to tell him? At the end of book 19, we don't know. And in book 20, you'll see what happens where we're like, oh gosh, she really doesn't know it's Odysseus. But at least we have this contest. And that is a famous part of the ancient Greek myth anyway. So this has been told in other parts of extant literature. Okay, so let's see what happens in book 20. Well, hopefully get through this. All right, 375. Outside in the entryway, he made his bed, raw oxhide spread on level ground, and heaped up fleeces left from sheep the Achaeans killed. And when he had lain down, Eurynome flung out a robe to cover him. Unsleeping, the Lord Odysseus lay, and roved in thought to the undoing of his enemies. Now came a covey of women. I'm just going to point that word out. A covey is used for doves, I believe, or pigeons or something. You know, birds that they would eat back then. So he calls them a covey of women. Laughing as they slipped out arm in arm as many a night before to the suitors' beds, and anger took him like a wave to leap into their midst and kill them every one. Or should he let them all go hot to bed one final night? His heart cried out within him, the way a brock, which is a female dog with whelps, which are puppies. So it's a dog who's just given birth to her puppies. His heart cried out within him the way a brock with whelps between her legs would howl and bristle at a stranger. So the hackles of his heart rose at that laughter. Knocking his breast, he muttered to himself, down, be steady. You've seen worse. That time the Cyclops, like a rock slide, ate your men while you looked on. Nobody, only guile, got you out of that cave alive. So he's trying to encourage himself to hang tight and to be clever about this. And he reminds himself of the fact that he came up with the word nobody. So he's like, hey, I'm so clever. Remember that, Odysseus? Talking to himself, giving him a little pep talk. His rage held hard in leash, submitted to his mind. That word in leash is only seen with Argos. Argos in his misery was held in leash because he couldn't come forth. So here he is, beggar sitting outside, not being able to do anything, just having to sit back, held in leash by the necessity of the timing. While he himself rocked, rolling from side to side. Here's a funny epic simile. As a cook turns a sausage big with blood and fat at a scorching blaze without a pause to broil it quick. So he rolled left and right, casting about to see how he alone, against the false, outrageous crowd of suitors, could press the fight. And out of the night sky, Athena came to him, out of the nearby dark and body like a woman, came and stood over his head to chide him. Why so wakeful, most forlorn of men? Here is your home, there lies your lady, and your son is here, as fine as one could wish a son to be. Odysseus looked up and answered, Aye, goddess, that much is true, but still, I have some cause to fret in this affair. I am one man, how can I whip those dogs? They are always here in force, neither is that the end of it, there's more to come. If by the will of Zeus and by your will I killed them all, where could I go for safety? Tell me that. And the gray-eyed goddess said, Your touching faith. Another man would trust some villainous mortal with no brains. And what am I? Your goddess guardian to the end in all your trials. Let it be plain as day. If 50 bands of men surrounded us, and every sword sang for your blood, you could make off still with her cows and sheep. Now, go to sleep. This all-night vigil wearies the flesh. You'll come out soon enough on the other side of trouble. So she calms him down. Raining soft sleep on his eyes, the beautiful one was gone back to Olympus. Now at peace the man slumbered and lay still, but not his lady. Wakeful again with all her cares, reclining on the soft bed, she wept and cried aloud until she had her fill of tears, then spoke in prayer first to Artemis. And now here is why we think, well, maybe she doesn't think it's Odysseus. O gracious divine Lady Artemis, daughter of Zeus, if you could only make an end now quickly, let the arrow fly, stop my heart. Or if some wind could take me by the hair up into the running cloud to plunge in tides of ocean, as hurricane winds took Pandarios' daughters when they were left at home alone. She's just saying, is there anyone, I'm done. I just want to die. So she's just dealing with this depression and hopelessness. I want to drop down to the last paragraph. Let me be blown out by the Olympians, shot by Artemis. I still might go and see amid the shades Odysseus and the rod of underworld. No coward's eye should light by my consenting. Evil may be endured when our days pass in mourning, heavy-hearted, hard beset. If only sleep reign over nighttime, blanketing the world's good and evil from our eyes. But not for me. Dreams, too, my demon sends me. Tonight the image of my Lord came by, as I remember him with troops. Oh, strange exultation. I thought him real, and not a dream. Now as the dawn appeared, all stitched in gold, the queen's cry reached Odysseus at his waking, so that he wondered, half asleep, it seemed she knew him, and stood near him. And he woke and picked his bedding up to stow away on a chair in the Megaron. The oxhide pad he took outdoors. There, spreading wide his arms, he prayed, "O Father Zeus, if over land and water after adversity you willed to bring me home, let someone in the waking house give me good augury, and a sign be shown too in the outer world." He prayed thus, and the mind of Zeus in heaven heard him. He thundered out of bright Olympus, down from above the cloudlands in reply, a rousing peal for Odysseus. Then a token came to him from a woman grinding flour in the court nearby. His own hand mills were there, and 12 maids had the job of grinding out whole grain and barley meal, the pith of men. Now all the rest, their bushels ground, were sleeping. One only, frail and slow, kept at it still. She stopped, stayed her hand, and her lord heard the omen from her lips. "Ah, Father Zeus, almighty over gods and men, a great bang of thunder that was, surely out of the starry sky, and not a cloud in sight. It is your nod to someone. Hear me then, make what I say come true. Let this day be the last the suitors feed, so dainty in Odysseus' hall. They made me work my heart out till I dropped, grinding barley. May they feast no more." The servant's prayer, after the cloudless thunder of Zeus, Odysseus heard with lifting heart. Sure in his bones that vengeance was at hand. Then other servants wakening came down to build and light a fresh fire at the hearth. Telemachus, clear-eyed as a god, awoke, put on his shirt and belted on his sword, bound rawhide sandals under his smooth feet, and took his bronze-shod lance. He came and stood on the broad sill of the doorway, calling Eurycleia, "Nurse, dear nurse, how did you treat our guest? Had he a supper and a good bed? Has he lain uncared for still? My mother is like that, perverse for all her cleverness. She'd entertain some riffraff and turn out a solid man." The old nurse answered him, "I would not be so quick to accuse her, child. He sat and drank here while he had a mind to. Food he had no longer hungered for, he said, for she did ask him. When he thought of sleeping, she ordered them to make a bed. Poor soul, poor gentleman, so humble and so miserable. He would accept no bed with rugs to lie on, but slept on sheepskins and a raw oxhide in the entryway. We covered him ourselves." Telemachus left the hall, hefting his lance with 2 swift, flickering hounds for company to face the island Achaeans in the square, and gently born Eurycleia, the daughter of Ops Pisenorides, called to the maids, "Bestir yourselves. You have your brooms. Go sprinkle the rooms and sweep them. Robe the chairs in red. Sponge off the tables till they shine. Wash out the wine bowls and 2-handled cups. You others go fetch water from the spring. No loitering. Come straight back. Our company will be here soon. Morning is sure to bring them. Everyone has a holiday today." The women ran to obey her, 20 girls off to the spring with jars for dusky water, the rest at work inside. Then tall woodcutters entered to split up logs for the hearth fire. The water carriers returned. We can see what a day looks like, and all the people that have been working, ongoing, for the last 20 years. And on their heels arrived the swineherd, driving 3 fat pigs chosen among his pens. In the wide court he let them feed, and said to Odysseus kindly, "Friend, are they more respectful of you now, or still insulting you?" Replied Odysseus, "The young men, yes, and may the gods requite those insolent puppies for the game they play in a home not their own. They have no decency." During this talk, Melanthios the goat herd came in, driving goats for the suitors' feast with his 2 herdsmen. Under the portico they tied the animals, and Melanthios looked at Odysseus with a sneer. Said he, "Stranger, I see you mean to stay and turn our stomachs begging in this hall. Clear out, why don't you? Or will you have to taste a bloody beating before you see the point? Your begging ways nauseate everyone. There are feasts elsewhere." Odysseus answered not a word, but grimly shook his head over his murderous heart. A third man came up now. Philoideus, we're in the bottom 380. The cattle foreman. So now we can see that he has a servant who takes care of all of his cattle, with an ox behind him and fat goats for the suitors. Ferrymen had brought these from the mainland, as they bring travelers to whoever comes along. Philoideus tied the beasts under the portico and joined the swineherd. "Who is this?" he said. "Who is the new arrival at the manor? Achaean, or what else does he claim to be? Where are his family and fields of home? Down on his luck, all right. Carries himself like a captain. How the immortal gods can change and drag us down once they begin to spin dark days for us. Kings and commanders too." Then he stepped over and took Odysseus by the right hand, saying, "Welcome, sir. May good luck lie ahead at the next turn." So now we have someone who's kind. one of his servants, another one. So we've got Eumaeus and this guy, his ox herd, Ploidius. Hard times you're having, surely. O Zeus, no god is more berserk in heaven if gentle folk whom you yourself begot, you plunge in grief and hardship without mercy. Sir, I began to sweat when I first saw you, and tears came to my eyes, remembering Odysseus. Rags like these he may be wearing somewhere on his wanderings now. I mean, if he's alive still under the sun, but if he's dead and in the house of death, I mourn Odysseus. He entrusted cows to me in Cephallenia when I was knee-high, and now his herds are numberless. No man else ever had cow multiply like grain. But new men tell me I must bring my beeves to feed them, who care nothing for our prince, fear nothing from the watchful gods. They crave partition of our lost king's land and wealth. My own feelings keep going round and round upon this tether. Can I desert the boy by moving herds and all to another country, a new life among strangers? Yet it's worse to stay here in my old post, herding cattle for upstarts. I'd have gone long since, taken service with another king. The shame is no more to be borne, but I keep thinking my own lord, poor devil, still might come and make a row of suitors in his hall. Odysseus, with his mind on action, answered, Herdsman, I make you out to be no coward and no fool. I can see that for myself. So let me tell you this, I swear by Zeus all highest, by the table set for friends, and by your king's hearthstone to which I've come, Odysseus will return. You'll be on hand to see, if you care to see it, how those who lord it here will be cut down. The cowman said, would God it all came true, you'd see the fight that's in me. Then Eumaeus echoed him and invoked the gods and prayed that his great-minded master should return. While these three talked, the suitors in the field had come together, plotting, what but death for Telemachus, when from the left an eagle crossed high with a rock dove in his claws. Amphinomus got up. Said he, cutting them short, friends, no luck lies in that plan for us. No luck knifing the lad. Let's think of feasting. So here they're walking by, planning how they're going to kill Telemachus. And a bird comes down. He's like, oh, we better not do that. A grateful thought they felt, and walking on entered the great hall of the hero Odysseus, where they all dropped their cloaks on chairs or couches and made a ritual slaughter, knifing sheep, fat goats, and pigs, knifing the grass-fed steer. Then tripes were broiled and eaten, mixing bowls were filled with wine. The swineherd passed out cups, Philoideus, chief cowherd, dealt the loaves into the panniers. Melanthios poured wine, and all their hands went out upon the feast. Telemachus placed his father to advantage just at the doorsill of the pillared hall, setting a stool there and a sawed-off table, gave him a share of tripes, poured out his wine in a golden cup, and said, stay here, sit down to drink with our young friends. I stand between you and any cutting word or cuffing hand from any suitor. Here is no public house, but the old home of Odysseus, my inheritance. Hold your tongues then, gentlemen, and your blows, and let no wrangling start, no scuffle either. The others, disconcerted, bit their lips at the ring in the young man's voice. Antinous, he's the ringleader of the suitors, Eupeithes' son, turned round to them and said, it goes against the grain, my lords, but still I say, we take this hectoring by Telemachus. You know Zeus balked at it, or else we might have shut his mouth a long time past, the silvery speaker. But Telemachus paid no heed to what Antinous said. Now public heralds wound through Ithaca, leading a file of beasts for sacrifice, and islanders gathered under the shade trees of Apollo and the precinct of the archer, while in hall the suitors roasted muffin and fat beef on skewers, pulling off the fragrant cuts, and those who did the roasting served Odysseus. They're going to throw a cow's foot. Let me see if there's anything else I need to say here. I've got about 9 minutes. I'm just trying to think how much time I have tomorrow. Hear me, lords, I have a thing to say. His hand went backward, fishing out a cow's hoof. Odysseus rolled his head to one side. The cow's hoof came, flying at Odysseus. Okay. We're just extending this off a little bit more. The young men greeted with the shouts of laughter. Okay, they're all laughing at Telemachus. All right, there's 19, and there's 20. Now, do you guys have like 8 minutes left in you for me to just get through the next few pages of the next chapter? All right, let's do this. And that way I feel like I can get through all of 21 and 22 tomorrow. Okay. let's think about the bow too, as Penelope is taking it out of its case after 20 long years. After 20 long years. This is called The Test of the Bow, page 391. Upon Penelope, most worn in love and thought, Athena cast a glance like a gray sea lifting her. Now to bring the tough bow out and bring the iron blades. Now try those dogs at archery to usher bloody slaughter in. So moving stairward, the queen took up a fine door hook of bronze, ivory hafted, smooth in her clenched hand, and led her maids down to a distant room, a storeroom where the master's treasure lay, bronze, bar gold, black iron forged and wrought. In this place hung the double torsion bow, and arrows in a quiver, a great sheath, quills of groaning. In the old time in Lacedaemon, her lord had got these arms from Iphitos. That's where Odysseus got them, Eurydice' son. The two met in Messenia at I can't pronounce his name, at Ortolocos' table on the day Odysseus claimed a debt owed by that realm, sheep stolen by Messenians out of Ithaca in their long ships, 300 head and herdsmen. So someone came to Ithaca, stole 300 head of sheep, and took them off to this island. Seniors of Ithaca and his father sent Odysseus on that far embassy. So when he was young, he had to go back and retrieve all the 300 sheep that they'd stolen. When Iphitus had come there tracking strays, 12 shy mares with mule coats yet unweaned. And a fatal chase, they led him over prairies into the hands of Heracles. That massive son of toil and mortal son of Zeus murdered his guest at wine in his own house. So there's Heracles murdering someone, inhuman, shameless in the sight of heaven, to keep the mares and colts in his own grange. Now Iphitus, when he knew Odysseus, gave him the master bowman's arm, for old Eurydice had left it on his deathbed to his son. In fellowship, Odysseus gave a lance and a sharp sword, but Heracles killed Iphitos before one friend could play host to the other, and Lord Odysseus would not take the bow and the black ships to the great war at Troy. As a keepsake, he put it by. It served him well at home in Ithaca. He has this huge bow, this mythical bow, that went from one hand to another. It's all included in in Hercules' story. So now he has this huge bow. He's kept it at home and didn't take it to Troy. Okay. Now the queen reached the storeroom door and halted. Here was an oaken sill, cut long ago and sanded clean and bedded true. 4 square the door jambs, and the shining doors were set by the careful builder. Penelope untied the strap around the curving handle, pushed her hook into the slit, aimed at the bolts inside, and shot them back. Then came a rasping sound as those bright doors the key had sprung gave way, a bellow like a bull's vaunt in a meadow. So these huge, gigantic doors, as they're opening, sound like a bull bellowing in the fields, followed by her light footfall entering over the plank floor. Herb-scented robes lay there in chests, but the lady's milk-white arms went up to lift the bow down from a peg in its own polished bow case. So think about this. The bow is tucked away. It's in its own bow case. The bow case is polished, and she, for the first time in 20 years, is taking it down. Now Penelope sank down, holding the weapon on her knees, and drew her husband's great bow out, and sobbed and bit her lip, and let the salt tears flow. Again, she's crying. It could be because she knows after today she has to choose someone to marry, or if she thinks that it's Odysseus, there's no way that even Odysseus and this bow can kill all of the suitors, and so she's probably never going to be able to see him or talk to him again. Then back she went to face the crowded hall, tremendous bow in hand, and on her shoulder hung the quiver spiked with coughing death. Behind her maids bore a basket full of axe heads, bronze and iron implements for the master's game. Thus in her beauty she approached the suitors, and near a pillar of the solid roof she paused, her shining veil across her cheeks. Her maids on either hand and still, then spoke to the banqueters. My lords, hear me, suitors indeed. You commandeered this house to feast and drink in day and night, my husband being long gone, long out of mind. You found no justification for yourselves, none, except your lust to marry me. Stand up then. We now declare a contest for that prize. Here is my lord Odysseus' hunting bow. Bend and string it if you can. Who sends an arrow through iron axe helve sockets 12 in line? I join my life with his and leave this place, my home, my rich and beautiful bridal house forever, to be remembered though I dream it only. Then to Eumaeus she said, carry the bow forward and carry the blades. Tears came to the swineherd's eyes as he reached out for the big bow. He laid it down at the suitor's feet, and across the room the cowherd sobbed, knowing the master's weapon. Antinous, the head ringleader suitor, growled with a glance at both. Clods, they go to pieces over nothing. You two there, why are you sniveling? To upset the woman even more? Has she not pain enough over her lost husband? Sit down, get on with dinner quietly, or cry about it outside if you must. Let us the bow. A clean-cut game it looks to me. Nobody bends that bow stave easily in this company. Is there a man here made like Odysseus? I remember him from childhood. I can see him even now. It's so interesting because if you had been reading before, you'll know that these boys were young. As Odysseus was watching them grow up, and he would play with them on his knee, and he would take care of them, and he treated them like his own, like they were his own sons. So I can see him even now. It's kind of ironic as he sees him in his mind, and he can probably see him in his mind pulling that bowstring and shooting the arrow. That was the way he played it, hoping inwardly to span the great horn bow with corded gut and drill the iron with his shot. He, Antinous, destined to be the first of all to savor blood from a biting arrow at his throat, a shaft drawn by the fingers of Odysseus, whom he had mocked and plundered, leading on the rest, his boon companions. Now they heard a gay snort of laughter from Telemachus, who said then brilliantly, a queer thing that! Has Zeus Almighty made me a half-wit? For all her spirit mother has given in, promised to go off with someone, and is that amusing? What am I cackling for? Step up, my lords, contend now for your prize. There is no woman like her in Achaia, not in old Argos, Pylos, or Mycenae, neither in Ithaca nor on the mainland. And you all know it without praise of mine. Come on, no hanging back, no more delay in getting the bow bent. Who's the winner? I myself should like to try that bow. Suppose I bend it and bring off the shot. My heart will be less heavy, seeing the queen my mother go for the last time from this house and hall, if I who stay can do my father's feat. He moved out quickly, dropping his crimson cloak, and lifted sword and sword belt from his shoulders. His preparation was to dig a trench, heaping the earth in a long ridge beside it to hold the blades half-bedded. A taut cord aligned the socket rings, and no one there but looked on wondering at his workmanship, for the boy had never seen it done. I'm going to stop there. Basically, Telemachus says, let's get this show on the road, and having never seen this done, he quickly digs the hole, puts the handles in, lines it up with a wire, and gets ready to go and said, okay, who's first? Now remember, Telemachus does not know the conversation that took place between his mother and his father. He doesn't know that this is a contest that Penelope came up and that Odysseus could do something with. So he's kind of getting it started, and we're going to see him do something a little bit foolish that is going to almost give the whole thing up. Okay, you guys were great today. That was a lot of me reading. Hopefully it was easier than you reading.